everybody, welcome back to my modern homestead. If you don't already know, my name is Janet and I'm so excited you're here. Today, as you can tell, we're back in the kitchen and I bet you can guess simply from the title and the canner on the stove that we are canning today. And today we are doing a canning recipe that the recipe in itself is not approved and tested, but the ingredients in it are. So let me tell you how I came up with the method for this. Again, I can't tell you to do this, but I am showing you what I did and how I came up with it. So, as you saw from the title, we are doing tomato bisque. Now, a bisque does have dairy in it. I personally am not putting the dairy in it because I don't like the way it changes it. I'm going to do that when we open the jar. But let me tell you about the other ingredients. One, you need tomatoes. Everybody cans tomatoes, so that's no biggie. And we know the times for that. Now, when I got to looking, of course, I couldn't find a recipe for tomato bisque. And I'm not leaving mine chunky, not completely chunky. We'll get to that. But I got to looking. We've got stewed tomatoes. Those have the same ingredients as the tomato bisque. And the stewed tomatoes, and veggies is 20 minutes for canning. And that's not quite what I wanted, but close. So I kept looking. Bernardine, is that how you say it? I don't know. Bernardine. You can do half tomatoes, half celery in equal parts for 35 minutes for 1 liter jars or 30 minutes for 500 milliliter jars. You can do celery for 35 minutes in half pints or pints. I do squash and onions, which I had to do a whole bunch of research to figure out onions. I do those for 40 minutes. Now, I kept digging and I did find a tested recipe for onions from Clemson University for 40 minutes. Hello, I am justified. Okay. Several years ago, I did squash and onions and I couldn't give you a current method for canning onions, but I can now, and it's exactly what I did. So today I give you how I'm doing tomato bisque with all the research. I spent 2 days researching, you guys. Yes, I rebel can, but I do it with some common sense and a little bit of research and what I do know about canning. So for my tomato bisque soup, we are using 4 cans of diced tomatoes, 2 onions, 2 ribs of celery, and 2 quarts of chicken stock. And how am I going to can this, you say? I'm going to can it at 10 pounds pressure because that's what I can at my altitude. I'm going to give it just a few extra minutes because, hey, a few extra minutes never hurt anything. I don't think we need them, but just in case, 45 minutes. So, are you ready to put it together? Let's go. Okay, down we go. Let's chop up the 2 ribs of celery and, sorry about that knob, and our 2 onions. Okay, first thing we're going to do is add the onions and celery to a large stock pot. And I'm not putting any butter or oil in here. I don't think it would hurt, but why put it in there if we don't need it? But what I am going to do is to add a cup of water. And all we're doing, don't you just love that sound? All we're doing is just going to soften these up just a little bit. And when you're chopping these, of course, the smaller you chop your pieces, the better they're going to cook. But this is a rustic soup, y'all. It's not even a soup, it's a bisque. And we're going to be blending it up. So the size of the pieces doesn't matter except for the time it takes to soften them. So let's just let them do their thing. And while they're doing their thing, let's put some water in our canner. Alrighty, y'all. I am using the All-American 930. Now, I don't always start with warm water, but for this recipe, I am because our ingredients are going to be hot in the jar. and we don't want to put a hot jar into a cold canner. Now my canner, it requires 3 inches of water. It doesn't say anything about taking water out if we put the jars in and the water comes up. Because it doesn't say anything about that, if the water comes up and covers the jars, that's how I leave it. Now, one thing I do to help me measure the water is to put my ruler into here. It's a clear ruler. That way I can see when we're at 3 inches of water. And it can be between 2.5 to 3 inches. So let's get the rest of it in there. Now I am using just water out of our well, and it is full of minerals. So what I'm going to do is add a glug of white vinegar. And if you're new to canning, this will help keep the minerals off of your jars so that you don't end up with yucky, chalky looking jars that just aren't even pleasant to handle. I like to do that before adding the rest of the water so that we don't go above the 3 inches. There we go, y'all. Now I've got all the water in here, so what I will do is just turn this to a medium low and just let the water warm up. Okay, these are softening up nicely, so while they continue to soften up, I'm going to go ahead and open up 4 cans of diced tomatoes. And when I tell you diced tomatoes, I do mean the 28-ounce size. Oh, y'all, I had to run outside to the freezer, walk back in here. Oh, this already smells so good. Now these are softening up really nicely now. One thing that is not in my recipe, I just had an idea to do. I think this cup will be okay. Is I'm going to add a cup of chopped bell peppers. Just any kind of sweet pepper is all I'm using. These are some I had in my garden that I chopped up. So we're just going to put them right in here. This is looking great, y'all. What I'm going to do now is to go in with about 2 tablespoons of garlic. You can use fresh garlic if you like. Just chop it up, smash it, however you like to do it. And just a hair more. Oh, voila. Let's give that a good mix. Oh, I wish I could smell this. Oh my goodness. Give it a little swoosh around for just a few seconds. These onions are starting to turn translucent. That's perfect. Water's almost cooked out of there. And then we're going to add in the tomatoes. Why canned tomato bisque, y'all? It's easy, because my husband asked me to. He loves my tomato bisque. And he said, can you please just can some? And that way, if you're not here or we need a quick dinner, we can just pull it off the shelf and heat it up real quick. And I said, ooh, I don't know about that. Let me research it. So here we are. All right, let's get the tomatoes in. Again, we're using 4 28-ounce cans. 1, 2, 3. I hope everything fits. And 4. Oh, voila. Give it a good mix. And then I'm going to come in with the chicken stock. I am actually using chicken broth, chicken stock, whichever you would like. You can make your own with the bouillon base, powder, or the paste. Ooh, this is going to be close. So there's one, and this is the 32-ounce carton. Need a bigger pan, don't I? But see how it makes a soup? I'm not worried about this being too thick in the jars because we're not going to make it thick. Okay, the last carton. And at this point, y'all, all we are trying to do is just to get everything, oh, it's splattering, to get everything hot. Once we have everything in the pan hot, it's ready to can. I'm going to bring it up to a boil. And I might let it boil for about 5 or so minutes, and then we'll put it into jars while it's still hot. See how thin it is? And we'll keep it thin in the jars. Now, while this is simmering, this is a great time to go ahead and clean up anything you messed up around the kitchen so that when you're ready to put this in the jars, your area is already clean. So while that's coming up to a boil, I will take this time. I've already cleaned up the counter and all the stuff I messed up. Now, I get my area ready to can. I put these down to put my jars on. Now, if you want your jars warm, go ahead and put them in your canner. Now, I'm going to use the regular mouth jars. I'm not using wide mouth jars, and I'll explain to you in just a minute why I'm doing that. Okay, there are our jars. I also like to go ahead and get my funnel and my jar lifter. I also go ahead and have my lids, make sure you wash them, and my rings. Don't forget your ladle. Okay, this is getting hot. I'm not going to add a lot of spices before I can it. We can add those later, but I am going to add just a little. I'm not even going to add all of that. Just a little basil and a little paprika. Again, when you're ready to make this, you open the jar, you can taste it and decide what you would like to add. I'm not even going to add pepper to it. So let's just let this go for just a few more minutes, and then we're going to put it into jars and get them into the canner. Oh, it's going to be amazing. This has been simmering probably, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is take my immersion blender and very, very carefully blend this up just a little bit. I'm not trying to get it completely smooth. There we go. It does get foamy, but that's okay. Now, it's still a little chunky, but I like this because it's a uniform size. And when I go to put it in jars, I can keep it kind of uniform. It's not all thick or it's not real thin. It's just the right consistency. So I'm going to let this continue to simmer for just a few minutes and clean this up, and then we'll get it in jars. I skimmed off some of that foam so you can see what this looks like. See, it's not completely smooth, but it's a good consistency so that you don't have lots of big chunks and then lots of liquid. It'll be pretty much even in the jars. It's go time, y'all. Let's get this to the counter and put it in to the jars. There we go. Now, as you can see, I did don an apron because this can be messy, and even without this, it can be messy. So here we go. We're going to fill each jar to 1 inch headspace. Alrighty, we got 6 quarts, well 6.5 quarts. What I'm going to do now is wipe the mouth of each jar. Make sure it's clean. You don't want anything to keep you from getting a good seal. Be careful, these are hot. And I turned up the water on my canner to try to closely match the temperature of these, because you don't want to stick these hot jars into cold water. That would be a disaster. So now we're going to put on each lid. I went crazy getting out jars. I don't know why I thought I needed this many. I'm not going to can this half quart. I'll just save it for later. Yay, I had enough 4-jar lids. I prefer the 4-jar lids. Have much better success. Finger tight. Once you feel resistance and the jar starts moving, that's good enough. You don't want to lock these down super tight. Okay, now they're ready to go in the canner. Let's get these in the canner. Now, if I had thought this through and realized this was only going to make 6 quarts, I would have used a smaller canner, but I thought I was going to have to use 2 layers, so I went with my big canner. But that's okay. Last one. Here we go. Let's put the lid on. My All-American has a notch, and there's an arrow on the lid. I lined them up. Make sure the lid is sitting as even as possible. You don't want a little space on one side and a big space on the other. Just loosely tighten those down where they don't fall off, then recheck to make sure everything is even. Okay, the spacing looks good. It's a little off. Tighten this one on the front down more. Okay. Now, tighten these down well. You don't need superhuman strength. You can't even see what I'm doing, can you? Just tighten these down as best you can all the way around. Now, we're going to let it vent. When steam starts coming out of here, whether you can hear it, see it, or feel it, don't put your hand close to it. But when steam starts coming out of here, you'll set the timer for 10 minutes. Okay, I promised I'd tell you why I did narrow mouth jars. Now, you can eat this just like it is in the jars now. You can leave it chunky before we use the immersion blender, and you can eat it that way. But if you would like to leave it chunky like before we use the immersion blender, if you have a blender like this is mine, and it has a cup attachment. And this lid right here that goes to the single cup, it will fit on the narrow mouth jar, so that when you're ready to eat your tomato bisque, if you would like to make it smoother, just put this on it, put it into your blender, and you're done. Well, you got to blend it up, but then you're done. So that's why I use the narrow mouth jars, just in case we want it smoother, which I doubt we will, but to also show you that you can leave it chunky and do it that way. So I hope you enjoyed that tidbit. There is now steam coming out of the vent. So I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes to let this vent. Okay, let's put the weight on using the 10-pound size. Now we'll let it come up to pressure, and when this starts making the noise, that little jiggle jiggle, we'll know it's time to start the timer for 45 minutes. Okay, now we're just going to turn off the stove. And then when this needle comes down and rests on this little metal peg and is at 0 pounds pressure, then and only then will we try to remove this weight. Even after it comes down and is at 0, I will still give it a few more minutes to rest and cool down. If I try to remove this and there's a lot of steam still coming out of it, I will stop and let it cool even more. Okay, it is down to 0 pressure. Let's see what this sounds like if we try to take it off. There's still a lot of steam, so let's give it just a few more minutes. Okay, let's try it again. Oh yeah, much better. Okay, now what we're going to do is loosen the wing nuts, and we'll slightly crack it and let it vent for just a few minutes. Okay, this is how I let it vent. Now leave it just like this for about 10 minutes before I take the lid totally off. Okay, let's take the lid off and see what we've got. Whew, I'm always relieved when I look in and everything looks okay. I wish I could smell the house. It smells so good. Let's take these out and get them over to the cooling table. There we go, y'all. There are our 6 quarts of tomato bisque, completely ready to eat just as soon as you take them off of the shelf. Now, if you would like, it is best if you warm it up, add some cream, adjust the seasonings. If it's too tangy, you can always add just a hair of sugar in there just to cut those tomatoes a bit. And you guys, how easy was that? Oh, and it's going to be so good. You can always add more basil, salt, pepper, chicken stock, whatever you need to do to make it yours. So you guys, thank you so much for joining me. You know I love it when you come and spend a few minutes with me. Until we meet again, may you be blessed. Love you guys. Bye-bye.